Welcome to Hidden Conversations. Hidden Conversations is coordinated by WVIK and hosted by Dr. LaDrina Wilson, a leadership and diversity expert. These conversations are designed to delve into many of the most difficult topics of race and equity facing the Quad Cities today. Many of these issues we hear about every day on the news, but we are often left unaware when they occur to our own friends and neighbors. We hope that by hearing firsthand stories and statistics from experts based right here in the Quad Cities, we can break down the myth that these issues only happen in other places, and in so doing, increase our empathy for those who literally live right next door. Thank you for joining us this evening. And now, here's Dr. LaDrina Wilson.
Hello, and thank you so much for joining us this evening. I just wanted to take the opportunity to share with you all that I'm so glad that we have continued to grow, to have more and more people tuning in and getting more information about our hidden conversations. So we are on the heels of Veterans Day, and I just wanted to take a moment to express my gratitude and to say thank you to all of the active duty military and veterans who have served and laid their lives on the lines for all of us. I want to say a special thank you to my grandfather, who's retired from the Army, joined the Army at age 17 and went on to build a wonderful career, retiring from John Deere and being a business owner. And I think the Army laid the foundation for that discipline. I want to thank my brother for fighting in Afghanistan. I'm Nathaniel Gardner. I want to thank my uncle, who was more like a brother to me, just being a couple of years older than me, for his service. He retired as a master sergeant in the Air Force, Cleo Davis Jr. My Uncle Ricky, my cousins. If I started down this path, and if I don't say someone's name, blame my head, not my heart. But I want to thank all of them for laying their lives on the line, and for all those servicemen and women who've laid their lives on their line and fought for our freedoms. Such as the freedom to be able to have these types of conversations where we talk about our experiences and how they have helped shape us, and how they have shaped our country. So to all the fallen soldiers and their families, thank you. Regardless of your race, color, or creed, we know the sacrifice that you have made for all of us, and we owe you a debt of gratitude for that. This evening, we have three individuals who will be joining us. And I am honored to share some time and space with these folks. We have former Chief Petty Officer, retired U.S. Navy, Darryl Howlett. He's also a local restaurateur, but we won't go there because that's not today's show. But I may give him a moment at some point to talk a little bit about that. We have Dr. Burl Randolph, who is retired colonel in the U.S. Army. And we have active duty Command Sergeant Major Tisa Scott to talk today a little bit about their experiences, and sharing with us to kind of shed light on what the military experience is as a Black soldier. So with that, I want to say thank you again for giving us a little bit of your time, and we will jump right into things. So one of the things that stood out to me was the percentage of people of color who serve in the military. So according to Pew Research, about 43% of our active duty, 1.3 million active duty men and women are people of color. About 17% are Black or African American, and increasingly they become more Black women who are joining in active duty. Now, representation on the whole for African Americans in this country is around 13%. Based on your experience, why do you think that there are more Blacks represented in the military than, maybe a higher proportion of Black folks represented in the military? Start with you, Dr. Randolph.
Can everyone hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Hey, thanks so much for having us on, Dr. LaDrina. Definitely appreciate it, and happy Veterans Day to all the veterans that are on here and watching and everything else. I say one of the reasons that there are probably more African Americans in the military than in the population is opportunity. It's 17% now, and I know I'll be dating myself when I give this statistic. When I first joined the military, it was at 29%. Okay. 29% of the Army was African American. It has steadily dropped down since then to 22% and then 17%. But I think there really is opportunity. It really is Army really is a meritocracy. If you do the things you're supposed to do, you do them well, or I say the military, you do the things you're supposed to do, you do them well, you excel, you'll get promoted. If you decide to be average, the military doesn't really play that too much. It's kind of an up and out system. And if you just want to coast, you won't be in it very long. But I think that the fact that you're it's more based on your merits per se than knowing anyone in particular, any sort of relationship to a certain point. I point that out to a certain point.
Now, it's interesting that you say that as we, I do want you to date yourself because I want to know how long ago you were in the service so we can kind of get an understanding of the decline that you're referencing. So can you share that information?
Okay, I was commissioned in 1980. Okay, let's get here. You know, most people aren't used to hearing like 19. They're used to 2000. So I was commissioned in 1983 as a second lieutenant from Kemper Military School and College. I joined the Army Reserve so I could kind of not lose any time while I attended Iowa State. I was in a reserve unit for 4 years, applied for active duty, was selected, just stayed on active duty. So I spent about 32 years total in the military. So I've seen all the different uniforms, all the different changes. And again, I've seen the steady decline. I think part of the decline is there are more African Americans that are attending college. There are more African Americans that probably have other opportunities. But like I said, when I joined, it was as high as 29%, which that's good as long as the decline is a positive decline, not a negative decline.
Right. So you said it's a meritocracy up to a point, okay? And I think it would be really helpful. We do some pre-work before we have these conversations. And Darryl, you had shared in one of our earlier conversations that your experience maybe is a little bit different than Dr. Burl has shared with us. Would you mind expanding on kind of what your thoughts are about the path that folks can take in the military, particularly the Black experience?
Yeah. So what I was talking about was, and I don't know if this is a difference because we're talking about officer community, vice, non-commissioned officers are enlisted, but especially in the Navy, I just felt like a lot of it had to do more with relationships, especially as you moved up in rank, almost to the point where you're going up on certain military boards, promotion boards. Almost like who knew you, who can vouch for your service, who can vouch for your work ethic and all those things. And sometimes if all things were being equal, maybe the other person who had a better relationship with that commanding officer or that department head maybe would get a better evaluation or a better review. And so all those things will matter once you go up for a board. It might be just that one point that will make a difference. So, and I saw that early in my career. So I don't know, everybody has their own different experiences, but that's just something that I saw. I would say that the Army, I feel like, has better opportunities for African Americans, for soldiers, as far as like getting promoted. So.
Okay. Well, active duty, perhaps you can shed some light on that, especially when we have data that suggests that there are more Black women who are joining the Army.
So thank you first for inviting us on, Ms. LaDrina. I'm happy to be a part of this platform. So what I would tell you is I joined the Army right out of high school. I graduated in 1993. I graduated in May, and I was in the Army by November. So kind of like what Darryl said, I think there is a difference when you look at enlisted ranks versus the officer ranks, which is what Mr. Randolph spoke about earlier. What I will say, opportunity is there. And you do over my time in the Army, I have seen a difference in seeing more African American soldiers in the military, ones who have achieved the rank to be in those leadership positions. So I can remember in 1993, I came in and I went to Fort Drum, New York, the coldest place ever. And I was like, who in the world sent me here? But I will tell you, I was in a chemical unit, and I just remember being one of few females in the unit, and then one of few African Americans in the unit as well. But I will say, before doing that 3-year tenure, before I left, my first sergeant was a female, and she was African American. So there is opportunity there. And I think over my 27 years in the Army, we have progressed. And you do see a lot of African Americans, and you do see us in leadership positions.
Okay. I won't talk about the 27 years of service because you're older than 25. So I don't know how that happens, but
it's called PT.
Clean living, right? Clean living. So.
Yep. So same for you, Dr. Burl. You don't look a day over 30, so I wouldn't have known.
Appreciate that. I need to come on the show more often. Maybe I'll get younger and younger, grow all my hair back.
So you talked a little bit about leadership. I would say that in various industries and businesses, Black representation and leadership roles lag behind when you look at particularly our white counterparts. And the same applies to the military in terms of our overall representation in most senior positions. The military, unlike the civilian world, from my perspective, seems to have a much more linear path of career ascension, kind of what you're kind of alluding to, Dr. Randolph. And, so what I am trying to understand is, if the path is a little bit more linear and you know that, you have to do certain things to achieve your rank, how do you explain the lack of representation when you get to the most senior positions in our military? And maybe Darryl, if you would want to shed some light on that for us from your perspective.
Who do you want to go first?
You can go first.
Okay. It's kind of like similar to what I was talking about earlier. I think as you progress in your career, I think we have to do a better job in saying, we as African-American military members, we have to do a better job of understanding both the schools and the courses and the assignments that we have to take in order to put us in position to be competitive with our white counterparts or of different races. I think that's a key, because sometimes if that information is not filtering down to you may not know a school or a course that you need in order to put yourself in a position to be promoted. And like I was saying last week, I had a senior chief who took me by the side when I was E4 and just kind of said, hey, I kind of see what you're doing. You got a good head on your shoulders. You have a good attitude every time I see you. However, I think you can do more. And you might be interested in applying for this school or this course or getting this certification. And as an E4, that was very beneficial for me because I hadn't really thought of it that way at that point in my career. And so I started looking for opportunities. And so when I became a chief, I tried to do the same thing. If I saw somebody E4, E3, E2, somebody who was doing okay, but I felt like they could have did more, I started talking to them like, hey, have you ever thought about going to this school, this communication school, this course will put you in a better position. Volunteer for this assignment that people would notice you. And so I think it's probably the same thing as you go up higher in your career, especially on the officer side. When you go up for those promotion boards, they're looking for certain assignments, certain things that you've done. And so we have to be able to take on those assignments and know that not only we can do that job, but we can do that job exceptionally well so that we are equal with our counterparts.
Else have another perspective that they'd like to share?
What Darryl said, being in the Army, we have a thing that we call career maps. And it's based off of your MOSs, which is your military occupational skills, which are all the different jobs that you have. And it outlines exactly what Darryl said. It tells you what schools you need to take, what jobs you need to take. And it kind of lays your career out from like private E1 all the way up to E9. And it tells you those different things as far as your military, your civilian education, as far as colleges, as far as different school opportunities that you can take, different assignments to broaden yourself to make you more competitive for the next rank. So I think the Army does a good job at laying out that career map for the enlisted soldiers to show you what your career should look like if that's what you aspire to do. And as long as you take that and you adhere to it and you go through that checklist and see what is, what works for you, I think that it'll help you along the way and it'll pave you for, promotion if that's what you choose to do.
So, Dr. Burl, you can jump in if you'd like.
I was going to say on the officer side, first of all, everything that you all said, exactly correct. It was a great lead into what I was going to say at the very beginning. If you don't remember anything else I say, if you plan on joining the military, get a mentor, get some mentors, do some mentoring, because these organizations are too big, too vast, too complex to go through them by yourself. So you mentioned getting to the higher levels. You don't know what you don't know. You don't know what you don't know as a command sergeant major or master chief or a colonel or whatever, because for African Americans, we don't receive mentoring the same way, at least as officers. We don't receive mentoring the same way as our white counterparts. So second lieutenant, first lieutenant, 99%, 95% promotion rate. So now you're a captain. So you're thinking, hey, I got it going on until you hit that major's promotion board. Well, the promotion between captain to major, it drops down to 70%. Well, it's less than that for African Americans. It's only 50%. And if you get a chance, there was a thesis done back in about 1980 something. I didn't do it, so
Okay.
somebody was before me, so I didn't do it. It was called "Why Black Officers Fail." It was written by Remy Butler. He was an African American lieutenant colonel at the time. He went on ahead, made one-star general, and he outlined all the things that didn't happen and why African Americans don't make general officer. Well, a friend of mine, now this actually I do actually know this person, 2008, Dr. Irving Smith, he did his thesis on why black officers continue to fail. Found all the same patterns. I did my dissertation on mentoring an African American Army captain success, a case study. For over the last 40 years, it's well documented that African American officers in all branches and women receive far less mentoring and far less support going up the field or going up the chain. And that pivotal point is at captain. If you can make captain to major, you can make lieutenant colonel, you can make colonel. General, not so much. You kind of already wanted to be a general, so you did everything right to begin with. And two, it is who you know sitting on that board, because it's a very small community. It's only 2%. And for African Americans, most of us officers are not in the combat arms. We're referred to as combat arms. We're in the combat support fields. And so most of the generals are in combat arms. And so that's why you see a very small number of us at that level. It's about 6% total. And it's actually a 1-for-1 swap. For every African American general, based on my studies, then there's one less white general. Okay, when we start talking about infringement and losing positions, it goes back to those relationships. Hey, I know Tisa, and she's sitting on the general officers board, so hey, hook a brother up. I know Darryl, but Darryl and I might not get along too well because I maybe didn't give a good review to his restaurant, so he may not give me the same, he may not give me the same love on the promotion board. And so at that level, because the community is so small, it really is relationships, and the relationships you've garnered during that period of time. And so again, making that transition from captain to major, if only 50% of us make it, there'll be less majors, less lieutenant colonels, less colonels. And by the time you get to be a colonel, sometimes you're just tired.
So I guess my question would be, part of what I hear you saying is mentorship is critically important once you hit a certain point, right? There's a roadmap that you can follow, but then relationships become really important. And this is no different than the civilian sector in a lot of ways, right? So mentorship is key. But what I'm wondering is, because a lot of times our circles, our relationships are much more homogenous, and it goes for all people of most walks of life, especially along our racial lines. We tend to be around people and spend our time with people, both in our work environment and our personal environment, with people who look like us. So what's the answer? To your knowledge, does the military have an intentional mentorship program? Is it important? Does it even matter?
It has an intentional mentorship program, but just based on my studies, most people don't know anything about it because it's not actually pushed. It's go out and get a mentor.
Well, then is that intentional? Then that begs
Yeah,
the question,
not
is that
right.
intentional?
Exactly. It's not. It's just go out and get a mentor. Well, okay, you have a program, but no one knows about it, and then you just say, "Go get a mentor." And when I tell you I don't know something, then you hold it against me. Well, how come you didn't have a mentor? Well, sir, if I knew I needed a mentor, we wouldn't be having this conversation, right? And so it's kind of circular, if you will. And so, like I said, as a second lieutenant and a first lieutenant, it's kind of important. Once you get captain, it's definitely important because you stay a captain for so long. There's so many critical things you need to do. If you wait until the end of that 6 years to try and do them, you won't make major. And
Yeah.
as far as being around people like us, um, I think we can probably all attest to the fact that you've asked yourself, am I the only one? You look to the left and you look to the right, and there is no one else like us. We're the only one. And so you're not hanging around other people like you because there's no one to hang around with. So it ends up becoming performance, performance, performance. We can't be qualified. We can't be fully qualified. We must be the best qualified at every gate to get promoted.
Yeah, I think it speaks to the need for, also for those people who are maybe not sure or don't even know that they have those leadership qualities, and maybe haven't recognized that they could aspire to that. When you don't see people who look like you don't necessarily think to try to achieve certain things because you don't have that example. Let's shift gears just a little bit here. And let's talk a little bit about something that's been quite controversial over the last couple of years. We've noticed that there's been controversy centered on various flags, but particularly the American flag, as it relates to this conversation, and the actions of professional athletes, primarily football and basketball players, which those sports are comprised of 70 to 80% Black athletes, who are taking a knee as a demonstration of protest of racial injustices in America, or racial inequities, specifically police brutality. Tisa, I'm probably going to start with you, but I just want to share a little bit of my viewpoint from what I've seen on the issues. Is much of the outrage that's being demonstrated regarding these demonstrations and taking a knee during the national anthem and in front of the flag comes from the individuals who are not athletes and who are not minorities, but rather the white spectators. And so I just want to say, Tisa, as a Black woman in the service, active duty, would you be willing to share your point of view on those who take a knee during the national anthem? And also, what does the flag mean to you?
Okay, that's a great question, and thank you. So when you look at the athletes who are, taking the knee, and you look at the reasons that they are taking the knee for what's going on in the world, for the social injustices, and they're exercising their freedom of speech. And so you look at different people who have different platforms, which their platform and their audience is a lot larger than ours. Everybody watches football, so you can't deny that. So in order to get the attention on something that you feel near and dear to, what other better platform to do it than what they're choosing to use? For me, I joined the military because I wanted to be a part of something bigger. I wanted to make sure that we do have the freedom of speech, that we do have freedom of choices, and to protect this country and to defend it. So even though I may not do the same thing as they do, I understand why they do it. And I think that sometimes that is what we lack as human beings, is just not wanting to acknowledge understanding as a person who is exercising their rights to do something or take an action that we may not personally ourselves agree with. Every morning I stay on the installation here, and every morning at 6:30, Reveille goes up and I salute the flag. Every morning, 06:30, and that's how I start my day. That's how most soldiers start their day. I salute the flag to remind me every single day of why I wear my uniform, and I continue to fight the good fight. And so I think that we as a generation just need to, when you see the people who are protesting against the person who is taking a knee, not be so judgmental and say, well, that's not the right thing to do, because now you're disrespecting the soldier. You're disrespecting the military. You're disrespecting our armed forces, because there's a bigger picture as to what they're doing and why they're doing it. So even though I may not agree with the actions that they're taking to do it, I understand it. And I understand the cause behind why they do take the knee, but I also understand my calling and why I salute the flag every day.
Thank you. And that just moves me to thank you again for your service. I really appreciate all that you all have done, because it really underscores, why we're here. Darryl, did you share your perspective? I know you had a personal example that you wanted to maybe share with us.
Yes, thank you. So with me, it's like, you have that portion on Facebook that says relationship. You put it's complicated. That's how this issue is with me. It's complicated because I come from a military, a family that has served in the military, and I'm still one of them kind of people that every now and then, when the national anthem is being played, I might have a little tear in my eye because I just think about it. So being in the military culture, you just have a different opinion and understanding about what the flag stands for and what it means. But you also kind of like what Command Sergeant Major Scott said. You also got to do some research. It's like, okay, if these players are doing this, they're doing it for a reason. And so, like what I said last week, I kind of went back to the Olympics in 1968 when and I can always forget their names, but the two Olympians from the U.S., they put up their Black Power fists when they're doing a award ceremony, and so that offended a lot of people. But at that point in time, it's one of the most iconic moments and one of the most iconic pictures in our history, and it kind of brought the attention of kind of like what was going on. I mean, 1968 was a lot of things going on, and they helped bring about attention on what African Americans were going through at that time. So with that, even though I salute the flag and I understand everything that it stands for, I also understand why you have citizens that may feel like that they have to do this in order to get the attention of wrongs that are being conducted in our country. So, and I'm always, one thing about living, you're always learning, you're always listening, you're always trying to get other people's opinions, different subjects and different topics where I had a viewpoint on when I was 20 years old. I have a entirely different viewpoint. I'm almost just getting ready to turn 50 here in a couple of years or two. So you're always trying to evolve as a human being and listen to everybody's viewpoint. But kind of like what we said earlier, also knowing that I served in the military, to be able to give citizens that right to protest freely is something that I'm proud of.
Yeah. I think that the interesting point that I hear you making, both of you, is about understanding. And it just seems like we are, especially in this racially charged environment that we are in right now, that people are so busy trying to be right that they're not trying to seek to understand. And just because we choose to do things differently doesn't always mean that you're right and I'm wrong. It just means that it's different. And so I can, that really resonates with me. The example you gave about the Olympics, you know, as I look through it and preparing for this conversation, I was thinking about, I like to think of things from a historical perspective. And I was thinking, you know, like the Civil War, where, you know, we like to, history in different ways. Abraham Lincoln is kind of portrayed as like this abolitionist, when that's not really what was happening, right? Like the Union was not positioned to win, and they needed Black men to come fight. But as soon as they were done fighting, they were not positioned to be able to vote, right? They were not positioned to participate in the democracy in the same way that other Americans were. And that went on past, you know, into World War II and GI Bill and who could do what, because the GI Bill still was, Jim Crow still existed, and it aligned with Jim Crow. And so I could go on and on about that, and I won't. But I think it's really important for me to share with you, from my perspective, is we can point to various situations and instances where the Black experience is not equitable, from a historical perspective and even a modern day perspective. But yet and still you chose to fight. And you fight for everyone, regardless of what the outcome may be for you when you get home, even if it is slightly different than the next person. I think that just says so much about your desire to serve and all that you have done for this country. So I just want to share that piece. Dr. Burl, I don't want to leave you out, so I'm going to make sure the next question I direct specifically to you, but we're going to move things along and try to get to a couple of topics. Is that okay with you, or do you have something? Okay. In 1948, President Harry Truman issued an executive order eliminating racial segregation in America's armed forces. And so that was one of the early momentum points in the civil rights movement. A lot of people don't talk about that in terms of, you know, the context of the civil rights movement. But that was definitely an early momentum point. From your experience and in a modern day context, how has the military benefited from racial diversity and specifically from having Black soldiers? And so I'm not looking at just sheer numbers. I'm really looking at, like, what do you feel the major contributions are or have been of Black soldiers to our military? Dr. Burl?
Well, I think it's that diversity of thought. When you have a group of people that are all the same, they think the same, they do things the same, then guess what? They can go down the same wrong road. But when you get a different perspective, then you do things differently. I remember it was my second deployment. The senior non-commissioned officer came in, and he sort of let us know that you officers come up with all this stuff, but you have no idea how it's supposed to be executed. And it pinged something in me that officers do the planning, but then they take that plan and they present it to the non-commissioned officers. The non-commissioned officers give their input, then the officers are supposed to take that plan back and make their changes to include all those changes. Then you bring that plan back and the non-commissioned officers execute. That's why the military is successful, because we actually do listen to other people. We actually listen to our non-commissioned officers. We actually listen to women, i.e., I started off as a combat arms officer. There were no women in my unit. I transferred to military intelligence. I then had 50% women. Guess what? I made sure my first sergeant was a woman because I wasn't used to working with women. I needed that different perspective. So if I was doing things or saying things that weren't quite right, somebody will pull me to the side and say, hey, you need to tone it down, or you need to ratchet up, or whatever it is. And then oftentimes we're sent into situations that we don't have any control over. We go to different countries, we interact with different cultures. If we don't have the wherewithal to be diverse before we get there, we end up having international incidents once we get there. And so I think that, and again, this doesn't happen in all units. This doesn't happen throughout all the services. So I'll just put that caveat on there. But if you can kind of broaden your mind to bring in those different, again, diversity of thought, I believe that's what makes the military much, much better.
Thank you. Tisa, what are your thoughts on that?
I agree with Dr. Randolph. Like you said, being a female, I am in the logistics community, so you see a mixture of male and female soldiers. I've been integrated with males and females throughout my whole career. But when you look at Combat Arms Unit, who was predominantly males until they recently just opened it up to female soldiers, it was an adjustment for them. We had to do training, or training was implemented to try to bring, how to integrate females into a workforce or into space that didn't exist like all these years that we've been in the Army. So it does diversity. It makes a unit better. And I agree. You can't have one thought process and say, hey, that it's not one cookie cutter solution, if you will, to say that males do it better, females do it better. It does. It takes a team in order for us to be successful. And I think over the years we've learned that, and we're doing a better job at integrating males, females, and not just male, females, but even different ethnic backgrounds into the formation, and including that into what we do to just make the formation better.
Okay. So we've talked a little bit about diversity. I want to kind of shift it to inclusion. So diversity is about representation, right? Who's at the table and the variety that's at the table. Inclusion is about equity and voice and opportunity. So we've talked a little bit about opportunity. The military is a great example of diversity and representation, especially when you compare it to the civilian world. What I want to know is, how do you feel, if you feel the military has a culture of inclusion? Now, I don't know if that's possible with the hierarchical structure of the military and who makes decisions and that type of thing. But does the structure of the military allow for inclusion? And is that a priority based on your experience? And Darryl, I'll start with you.
I think it is a priority, especially when you consider everything that's happened in 2020. Each one of the branches of service, Department of Defense, is trying to, they acknowledge that, some things are not working, and we need to take a look back and figure out what's going on. How can we improve our process? And it's not just about diversity, but it is about inclusion. And when I think of inclusion, I think about, do you have a seat at the table when important decisions are being made, when policies are rolling out that's going to affect the unit, and from the command all the way down to the down trace units? Do you have a seat at that table to give your input? And so it's not just about diversity of race, it's also about diversity of input, of philosophies. And so inclusion, I mean, you have a seat at the table, and not just that you have a seat at the table, but that your viewpoint is valued, and that somebody is listening to you and saying, you know what, I didn't think about that before. I didn't understand that. Now you gave me an understanding, and you are a valued member of the team, because I think that's the last component. Not only do you have a seat at the table, not only are you giving your views and your philosophy, but then somebody is recognizing that and telling you, hey, I understand what you're saying. I'm going to take the input that you provided. And then also, I'm going to recognize and thank you for providing that input, and not just treat you like a third wheel. So I think those are key as far as like inclusion. And I think that that's the piece, not only for the military, but when you're talking about corporate America, that is something that needs to happen, because we've all heard about, certain people or race or gender, they get invited to the party, if you will, but there's only one, and they're just supposed to be there and be quiet and be happy to be there. Well, that's not really the definition of inclusion. To me, that means you got full input and everybody has full buy-in.
Definitely. So you mentioned corporate America. What do you think that corporate America could learn from the military about inclusion and diversity?
I think it starts with respect. Even before you get invited to that seat at the table, it has to be a level of respect, saying, I want to hear what you have to say. I don't want you at this table because somebody is forcing me, forcing.
And there. Darryl, can you repeat that? Uh-oh. We'll shift gears because we're having a little technical difficulty.
You see me now? I'm back.
Oh, we can see you and we can hear you. Okay.
Okay. So what I was saying is like just important to be able to even in the corporate world to be able to have that seat at the table and that level of respect that you have to have for one another. And it has to go both ways.
Okay. Dr. Randolph, your thoughts on what corporate America or business and industry could learn from the military about diversity and inclusion and teamwork?
Well, I think that if you're given a seat at the table for whatever reason, one, you need to take it, and two, you need to speak up. Too often, people get a seat at the table and they're on mute. Well, you have an obligation because 9 times out of 10, you will be the only one at the table who looks like you. So if you don't speak up, it's not said. You may be the only woman at the table. If you don't speak up for other women, it will not be said. And so that that perspective will not change if you simply sit there at the table and don't say anything. And I guess I sabotaged myself, if you will, when I was younger. You know, when you're young and you're full of energy, got a lot of hair, think you can do anything. And so I would always speak my piece. And I remember once, actually, we were deploying for the first time, and I didn't say anything. Everything stopped because I wasn't talking. And they're like, are you sick? No. Is everything okay? Well, no, it's not okay. You're going to go to combat, so no, nothing's okay. Why come you're not saying anything? Because I'm not certain if I'm getting through. I'm not certain if I'm being taken seriously. So why would I waste my time speaking out if no one's taking me seriously? Again, when you're young and you're a captain and, you know, McDonald's is always hiring and you can get another job, you know, you're very, very bold to say. But
I know that's right.
There are peers of mine that would not do that. Just flat out would not do that because they're so worried about their next promotion. You can't do that. You have to make whatever it is you're going to say. And again, doesn't have to be negative, doesn't have to be ugly, but it needs to be said so that that perspective is heard.
But don't you think that that's applicable to a lot of different, not just the military, like as a Black person being in predominantly white spaces in some instances, but then even just being a woman in a room full of men, you don't always know how to find your voice in those situations. And I would say that, you know, as a retired person versus being active duty, the way you use your voice is different too, right? Like, so at different points in your career, you could be young and be naive enough to speak up and think that, you know, it won't have implications, or you can be young and be afraid that it will have implications, right? And so I think there's some personality components, but I think it goes back to the importance of mentorship and helping people find their voice, because there is value in diversity of perspective. We do bring a lot to the table, not just in quantity and being the one or one of few, but in that perspective that we bring and those experiences that we bring. Not just as a person who comes from a marginalized group or historically marginalized group, but from our lived experiences. We view the world differently, and not in a deficient way. It's just another angle of approaching problem solving. And so I really appreciate the comments around speaking up. I guess my question is, I know that there are real implications for people when they do speak up, right? And so how do we help people who are not used to working with people who are differently than them, regardless of what industry they're in? How do we help break that barrier? I think it's conversations like this, right? But what else? What else can we be doing to help break some of those barriers to make sure that workplaces are inclusive?
Well, sometimes you have to speak up for other people. My commander absolutely positively did not like my first sergeant because I had a female first sergeant. He just did, and told me, I do not like her. She's too nice, she's too friendly, she's too whatever. And so she couldn't catch a break. Well, we did something one day and it helped the entire organization. And I knew there was something that she wanted to do. So I ran over and said, go ask the colonel, can you do this? She's like, sir, go ask the colonel, can you do this? Sir, go. She went, she came back. She's like, how did you know he would say yes? I said, because we greased the skid based on our success. And I wanted to build you up so that you would have a success. I never told her that he didn't like her. And it just wasn't applicable. So sometimes we have to help each other, grease the skid, speak up for someone, know the nuances. Because my relationship with him was completely different than her relationship. Matter of fact, they didn't have a relationship. But she was my first sergeant. I needed to look out for her. I needed to provide her top cover so that she could go on in her career. And she did. She went on ahead, made command sergeant major. But if he had evaluated her negatively, that would have never happened.
Understood. Darryl, I'll just a little bit more. Would you be willing to share your thoughts on whether or not being a soldier has shielded you from any of the racial inequities that maybe Black civilians experience?
In some cases, yes, and some cases, no. If you live on a military installation, sometimes you are insulated from what's going on outside the gate, if you will, because it's probably like most military bases, it's probably the safest place you'll ever live on, and it's like great for most military families. However, if you live outside the base, sometimes there are challenges. I gave the story last week that I've been living in the Quad Cities like for 20 years, and I've told people I've been pulled over by 5 times by different police departments while walking, not driving. I was either walking and I was walking or I was jogging, and I intentionally every time I would do that, I would have my Navy PT gear on because in my mind I'm thinking, nobody's gonna pull me over. I got my Navy gear on, and sure enough, 5 different times I was pulled over, and each time it was always almost the same thing. Either I looked like a suspect, or the police got a phone call saying that African American was running in their neighborhood, even though I lived in the neighborhood. And so, it happens, and I would tell my friends, I would tell my coworkers, and they were like, they couldn't believe it. And I was like, yeah, it happens. It still happens. And it happened to me. And it's very frustrating because, like we talked about earlier, you're serving your country and you fighting for the right for people to protest and the flag is going up. But at the same time, you're outside of your safe zone on base, and you feel like authorities look at you like you're any other person that they may have ill will against or ill thoughts about. So,
or sometimes it's just bias, right? So it's not letting some folks off the hook, but I mean, I want to put that out there too,
Yeah, I mean the first or second time I got pulled over and I had finished my run and I was walking back home and police pulled me over and they said, "Well, can we see your ID card?" Because I told them I was in the military. I said, "I really don't have any identification on me." I said, "If you want, my house is like 3 blocks, so we can go down there and I can show you my ID card." I said, and I asked them, I said, "So when you pull anybody else over, if it's like a female and they run it, and it's like, do you ever pull them over and do you ever ask for their ID card on their person?" And at that point I was being difficult, so they never gave me an answer for that. So
it sounds like you're being curious.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I appreciate you sharing that. Does anybody else have any experiences they want to share or anything to add to that?
Well, I found in the military you can be discriminated against just as easily as you can in civilian life. It's every accomplishment is questioned, but it's a little subtle racism, little things about affirmative action and how you got to college and just different things like that. And then when that's not effective enough, then you get the hidden racism, where communication stops, messages that everyone else receives, you don't receive. Or when you do receive them, they're a day late and a dollar short, or you receive partial messages. But if you've created an environment where people do respect you, you're helping them, they come to your rescue. They know you're being discriminated against. They know you're not receiving those messages, or you're receiving partial messages. And so they then come to help you. And so has it shielded me? No, it's a little bit more subtle. It's more subtle. It's not quite as overt, but it's still there.
Tisa, you were going to say something?
No, I was just going to say that I do think wearing the uniform kind of does shield you a little bit. And I'll share a story. Normally when I'm out and about, kind of like what Darryl said, on post, you really don't have that issue of people acknowledging because they know you're a soldier too. But when you go outside the gate, that's when you kind of experience it. So I can leave Rock Island and go like to one of the local, you pick a place. And if I'm in uniform, I've had, you normally get the, hey, thanks for being a soldier. Thank you for your service to our country. Everybody speaks to you. People will pay for their groceries and they'll come back all the way around and speak to you, or even, offer to pay for your groceries, if you will, just because you're a soldier. And I think to myself, like when I'm not in uniform, nobody does that. So I think, they appreciate what we do. But I think too, in a sense, it has shielded me a little bit but there is some subliminal racism, I think, still exists to soldiers that I've experienced here. I was in uniform in a store, and again, it becomes very, you just kind of realize it a little bit more when people put an emphasis on what they say to you. So I've had people since I've been here say to me, "Thank you for serving my country." And that my word kind of stuck out to me because I'm like, okay, normally when people say thank you for serving our country, they're paying a respect to you and they're thanking you for that service. But then when you have someone tell you, thank you for serving my country, what are you really saying to me? So I think, I've experienced it on both sides in uniform. I never thought I would, but it just made me kind of take a step back. I'm a professional, but I took a step back and, I just was like, okay. And I move forward. And sometimes I think to myself, like, should I have addressed that? Should I have said my country, our country, or, you just acknowledge what it is and you keep going. So
it's really interesting that you said, I'm a professional. I took a step back. I literally physically, you didn't share this story with me before. So I had a physical response to that, like where I'm like, okay, now you're professional. Remember that. Because those racially charged comments that are just, they're subtle enough to where you have to question, do I call this? I know what's happening, right? I know exactly what's happening, but do I want to look like the angry Black woman or the angry Black man by calling it out? Do I want to mirror that behavior and remind him that him or her, that it's our country, or is it just not worth it? Because some people you'll never change and it was a quick interaction, but all of those things stick with you over time, right? And you still show up every day regardless, but it's shocking to me because we don't see things the way that we did 40, 50 years ago. There are people that don't really believe that racism exists, right? Like, so I know we are more than that moment, and we are more than the sum of all of those moments too, because it happens all the time. I've been followed around in a hair store here, and I'm like, not going to steal anything. This is under the guise of customer service, whatever. But you have to pick your battles, right? And so it's shocking to me that you could be in uniform and still having some of those types of experience. But I think it's important for people to know when you're making these references and when you're sharing that with us, it's here. That you're not talking about when you were on another base. You're talking about here in our community. And so we need to be aware of this, and we need to know these things so that we can all do better and help our neighbors do better. We are we are rounding the corner on just a few minutes left, and I want to make sure I give everybody a chance to answer this question because it's really important to me to be able to share with our listeners what your perspective is. We live in divided times, and in these times, when you interrogate or question or examine any American institution, it often stokes fear or makes people that feel like you lack patriotism. The fact that you would question how a system, the American system, is operating, right? So I think the acknowledgement of systemic racism is often people will say, well, that's a crutch for some people, or people don't have personal accountability. It's not racism that is preventing people from moving forward, or even the fact that you would bring up a system that has time and time again shown that there are racist elements in it, right? And from my perspective, foundational elements that are racist. People will say, well, that's reverse racism because you're the one that is pointing out that, this group of people did something that, just simply isn't true. I feel confident that you can both interrogate a system and still be very proud to be part of that system. And I'm one of those people. I'm very proud to be an American, but I'm also demanding that we do better as Americans and that we grow closer as Americans and that we try to work toward overcoming racism. As military servicemen and women, what makes you most proud to serve and what makes you most proud to fight for America? Tisa, I'll start with you since.
Okay, thank you. That's a great question. I'm proud to serve because I will tell you, the military has opened a lot of doors for me. It has provided me with opportunities that I probably would not have had I not joined. And I'm thankful for that. It's provided a way for me to take care of my immediate family, my extended family, go to school, advance, professionally and on a personal level. It allows me to travel, to see the world. I've met some awesome people that I would have probably never met had I not joined the military. And, it's protected. It's been a part of something that's bigger than just myself. And I know that when I put this uniform on, it may not be perfect, but I know that we're working towards making our formation equal across the board, for all people. So I like knowing that you and everybody else can sleep at night, knowing that we put this uniform on. We take this oath, to protect and defend this country of the United States. And it's a great place. And I'm not just saying that as a cliche. I truly, truly believe in that. And I just think that, I love being in the military. Again, I've been in it for 27 years. This is all I know. But I'm sure if I had the choice to do it all over again, that I would do and make the same choices again.
Thank you. Darryl?
I would say that serving the military, you have to understand that, none of us are perfect. And you have to look, even looking at our country, our law, the Constitution is a living document. And we've been a country for over 200, almost 250 years. And we've made 18 amendments to it. And I don't know if that number is exactly right. I think it's 18, could be 21. So was not a perfect document, and it's still being changed. Laws are constantly being reworked and changed, and it's just an acknowledgement that something needs to be done in order for it to get better. So I never bought into the argument. It's like, well, you're not being patriotic. You're not being patriotic if you're not trying to improve the system. You're not patriotic if you're trying to improve your country. That's what we all should be striving to do each and every day, is improving the system, improving where everybody lives up to, which what Dr. Martin Luther King says, where we live up to the words that were in the Declaration of Independence. That's the words that are in the Constitution. That's every American citizen should be doing that on a daily basis and looking at themselves in the mirror and say, hey, is there something else that I could be doing to make whatever situation, whatever topic, whatever subject better? Not making it worse, but better. And in order for us to make that better, sometimes we have to have those difficult conversations with each other. yeah, sometimes people don't like conflict. Sometimes people don't want to have those conversations, but they need to be had in order for us to progress as people and as a nation.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. A more perfect, I think that's what
Yeah.
we're striving to, right?
Yeah.
Dr. Burl Randolph, you gonna round us out here?
I will round us out here. I think my service in the military gave me opportunities I'm like Tisha and Darryl I would have never had otherwise. I come from Kansas City, pretty rough neighborhood, pretty rough zip code, as my friend would call it, and a lot of people didn't make it out. So it gave me opportunity, allowed me to achieve, it allowed me to advance, and I know that I wouldn't do anything differently. I gave a presentation earlier today about pursuing your passion, and the military has always been my passion. So I'm very, very fortunate to be able to pursue that. And again, all African American background, very few African American or very few white Americans as teachers at my elementary school and middle school. Only 2 white students at my high school, and I remember their names because there was only 2 of them, but they stuck it out all 4 years. So again, very, very homogenous. So leaving the nest and having to broaden my mind, that's what the military did for me. And as far as those who deny systemic racism, the ones who talk the loudest that it doesn't exist, they've done the least to destroy it. We have systemic isms: racism, sexism, ageism, disabilityism, LGBT. We have systemic isms. And so that doesn't mean that you're doing it. It just means that that's our system. And until everyone starts to acknowledge that that's our system and work towards stomping all that stuff out, you'll have those that take it personal. And I think that if they're taking it personal, then maybe they're the ones that are doing it.
Excellent, excellent point. Well, I just want to say one last time, thank you so much for sharing your time, your intellect, your perspective, and your experience. Thank you so much for your service and all you have done for our country. I have thoroughly enjoyed this panel. I hope that our audience has as well. And we hope to see you all next month. For December, our conversation will center on education and inequities in education and what we need to do better, do more, and have better outcomes. Thank you so much and take care.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us this evening for Hidden Conversations. The Hidden Conversations project is coordinated by WVIK and organized by Tracy White, Dr. LaDrina Wilson, and myself, Jared Johnson. We have also been advised by Dr. Lauren Hammond Ford, Ryan Sadler, and WVIK's Intelligent Conversations Planning Committee. This series of Hidden Conversations is scheduled to culminate with WVIK's Intelligent Conversations event on March 11th, featuring former NPR host and current Washington Post contributor Michelle Norris, where she will discuss her books, The Grace of Silence, and the forthcoming book, The Race Card Project. We hope you are able to join us for all of these important and meaningful conversations.